Bitcoin. We're going to talk about Bitcoin. I got my Bitcoin hat on today because Bitcoin has been kind of getting a lot of bad press and hate, a lot of bearish news and sentiment out there in the market because it was going up and now it's going down, right? The structure was up, right? And people were calling it a weak bullish structure. And then the structure has now broken down some, and we're, instead of breaking out above $82,000 and pushing up to, 86, 87, 90 to 97, we went down to 75, right? And there's been a lot of negative headlines and press this past week coming out about Bitcoin. And this always happens when Bitcoin stalls, when it fails to just go up for forever. All the bears come out in full force, all the headlines come out in full force. And it just is the nature of this asset and this market that when Bitcoin fails to, overperform, that all the haters are gonna be like, I told you so. So if you go on crypto Twitter or whatnot, you'll see all the people posting their bear thesis. All right, hey, it's done for Bitcoin. It's gonna go down and crash to the 50s, the 40s, even potentially the 30s. This was a bull trap in the bear market. The bear market's not over. You're silly for believing that the 4-year cycle was over and yada, yada, yada. Now, they may be right, okay? They may be right because this coincidentally corresponds with other cycles where Bitcoin was in a bear market and about, halfway through the bear market that Bitcoin pushed up to the 200-day EMA and was rejected, okay? So this is not out of the ordinary for other bear cycles that Bitcoin has had. So you have to keep that in mind. There is still the camp that believes that we are still on the 4-year cycle and that Bitcoin is going to do the same 4-year cycle things, which means it will likely go down further from here, and it might do that fast. Bitcoin has a tendency to move down fast when it really moves down. And then we will have a real new low and official low of this bear market sometime between September and November in the next few months, okay? And that is in alignment with previous cycles. So that is like the control. That is the control strategy for this. So if you're looking at Bitcoin, you're looking at the price, even if you're looking at all the news and stuff coming out about this, right? That should generally be your control frame of reference for this. And there's, precedent for it until we really break out of the 4-year cycle, and you really don't know. With this type of thing, like you don't know if the bottom that we had, the local bottom in February at about $60,000, which was about a 52% drawdown from the all-time high back in October, like 4th, 5th of 2025. You really don't know if that's the bottom until like Bitcoin doubles in price or it goes up and pushes into new all-time highs, or it's like 6+ months of it not setting a new low. Right? You don't really officially know that that's a bottom until you look back on it, right? It'd be great if you knew it was a bottom right away, but generally speaking, you can only really determine bottoms of bear markets retroactively. And that would be if that was actually the bottom for Bitcoin, 60K, and we're moving up and this wasn't a bear market rally, a bull trap like people like to call it, right? Well, you would then expect Bitcoin to recover from here, right? We're about 75K right now, and then start pushing up to new all-time highs. And we won't really see any level that close to that 60K mark anytime soon. Or if we do, right, we'll see close to that level. We won't break that level, and it'll kind of be like this double bottom situation, and then we'll springboard to rallying back up and pushing to or working our way to moving to new all-time highs over the next few months. So there's a lot of people that believe that new scenario could be the case, where we've already seen the worst of it. We're going to have some volatility going on, but we're not going to put in a new bottom. That the people calling for the official bottom and low of this cycle from September to November are going to be wrong. Right, and the reason is because the nature of the market has changed, right? With ETFs, institutions buying, countries buying, things like the Clarity Act, getting regulatory clarity on this asset class are coming into play. That the nature of the market's changed. Plus, because we didn't have that big blow off top with this last cycle, that we are more likely not to have a super low crash bottom because of that as well. And I kind of understand both perspectives. I mean, the trend is kind of our friend with this, with the control that, that it is likely and expected that we could see new lows for Bitcoin over the summer leading into the fall. That wouldn't be the worst thing ever, especially if you are prepared. And so like myself, I am mostly in cash. So, prepared for that. I have some exposure to the market. I have, my Bitcoin that I hold and I don't do anything with. I just hodl that stuff. But those both can play out. And so I know this is like, oh my gosh, he's saying it could go up, it could go down. And the reality is that's the kind of situation that we're in right now. I think we are more probable to go down unless there is some catalyst that lifts Bitcoin up. So because we were rejected at the 200-day EMA around like $82,000, and we didn't burst through it, and now we've went from that to 75. We've broken a few structures, conveniently like kind of following the same pattern as other bear markets. It looks to be that we might end up playing out that normal bear market strategy that Bitcoin goes through. Now, also during this time, you have a lot of the Bitcoin haters coming out. I mean, this past couple of days was just a ton of bearish news on Bitcoin, when the previous week was a ton of bullish news on Bitcoin. MicroStrategy buying, like the Clarity Act passing, all this kind of stuff. Tesla has Bitcoin, all this crazy stuff. Like last week, like 2 weeks ago, was just praising Bitcoin. And then once momentum stalled, it gave all the bearish opportunists the ability to come in and be like, no, we told you so. We're right, you're wrong. And this is just how the market operates. I even saw Peter Schiff on a podcast with Graham Stephan, I think, talking about how, Bitcoin, it's played out. I mean, Mark Cuban was another guy that's talking about how he sold his Bitcoin. Again, conveniently, they all come out at the same time, right? They all come out right when you have this inflection point. Like, it's like an arrow when it tilts bullish, you have all the bullish people coming out, right? And hyping Bitcoin up. And when it tilts bearish, you have all the bearish people coming out and, saying Bitcoin is going to go down and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what it's going to do in the future. I think it's better to kind of have the perspective, right? It's more risk averse to have the perspective that Bitcoin is going to potentially set new lows, and that you don't go full all in thinking that the bottom's in, I need to put everything in. Generally, that's never the best strategy, to just dump all your dry powder into the market at any point in time, because it takes away your flexibility. It takes away your optionality if market conditions change. Right? So I think it's still better to lean that, hey, we could see some volatility, we could see some dips, we could see some more bearish sentiment, and we could see potentially some institutions or some things like that are involved go belly up, and really that would be the bottom of the market. So we could wait for that to happen. But there's a scenario that, hey, like, because we didn't have the big blow off top, that maybe we won't have that big drawdown, maybe it won't play out like before. So I think it's important to be prepared for both and the situation that the market gives us. Now, a couple of factors that could contribute to the normal Bitcoin bear market playing out and the official bottom not actually being in. We are going into a midterm year, and historically Bitcoin has, not performed great going into that or over the summer going into midterms. There's the cliche saying of sell in May and go away. So we do have to deal with that, especially with institutions and people that work for those institutions going on summer break and all that kind of stuff. We could actually see that play out maybe more with this kind of market because of these participants than before. Maybe, maybe not, right? Be interesting to see how that plays out, but that is a variable in play. We also have the stock market at all-time highs, right? The S&P is like putting in new all-time highs. And, I've heard that historically leading into midterm years, right, that the summer before the midterms, that we often see a correction, especially if it's at an all-time high. If we do that, we might get some more risk-off appetite. Then we have the inflation numbers that aren't looking great. The 30-year bond is up. Mortgage rates are up. So people are dealing with that. Consumer sentiment is down. People don't necessarily have the extra spending money, or they don't feel they have that extra spending money and budget to allocate to things. So that can be a contributing factor for this kind of stuff. So that fear in the market, people that don't want to part with their cash, they're not feeling like they can just go buy anything or take on more risk. And so if that is, we have consumers that are being more thrifty and savings, then we could also see that play out. And so if you have a stock market dip and things like that coming in, so people are risk off, people less likely to buy, all these contributing factors could lead to a very red and volatile summer for Bitcoin, which would kind of confirm that traditional bear case, that we're still in the bear market, that we're not out of it yet, that the bottom is not actually in. Okay, so there's a lot of those factors at play. You know, on the flip side, guys like Michael Saylor said, hey, bottom's in. I think we'll start moving up from here, right? Consolidating, moving up slowly and whatnot. That could play out as well because we have different structures of the market, different participants, and different strategies at play, different size capital pools getting involved. You have the Clarity Act and all that kind of stuff. I don't know which is going to happen. I'm kind of prepared and okay with both scenarios should they play out. Again, I'm mostly in cash, so I can take advantage of either situation. And I think that's something that you should think about as well, right? When you are in cash, right, you haven't put all your dry powder in, you have optionality when you go and when the market does crazy things. So it's not a bad thing. And the other thing that I think that is important for people to do is find ways to generate more cash flow, start a side hustle. Summer's great for side hustles, no matter who you are, right? If you don't run a business or whatnot, you can always do things like pressure washing or cutting grass or gardening or washing windows or car washes. There's all sorts of ways you can make some extra money so that you have the cash so you can deploy it if there's a big dip in Bitcoin and you want to allocate more to it. It's a great, fantastic time. And being patient and strategic is not a bad strategy. And with Bitcoin, you know, you're never going to get the exact top and never going to get the exact bottom. You should probably avoid trying to only go in when you believe is the exact bottom or the exact top, right? You should just try to find ranges that you believe. And I do think that into the fall and beyond, depending on what happens, there could be a lot of crazy stuff that happens, you know, with aliens, with AI, with these regulatory stuff. There could be a lot of crazy wild cards that could happen in the next, 6 to 12 months. But that is the time period in which we should be expected to start entering into a new bull market for Bitcoin. And especially if we're able to, close out the Iran war, if we're able to do that, if we're able to get oil and energy prices down, which would be fantastic, which will help out a lot of people, and we're able to start lowering interest rates, if possible, right? Getting some lower interest rates that frees up more capital, then we could see a big boost in some of these risk assets at the convenient time of that's when we expect Bitcoin to start going up again. The key here, right, is just be prepared for these different scenarios. I know, yes, it could go up, it could go down, but be prepared for these scenarios so that you can adapt when they happen, to know the different things. This is something I talk about a lot with my students, is like, these are all probabilities. And so just knowing the potential paths that it could take and have plans in place for either of those situations so you're not caught off guard or you're not all in on one path. And then if it does something differently, then you are too exposed, or you don't have the ability to move, right? You don't have the ability to take advantage of a new situation that presents itself. You got to constantly be updating what you're thinking about, what your plan is, and acting accordingly. So I think that is a good perspective to have for this. And the final thing is like, right now is exactly when you expect all the FUD-sters to be out, all the negative news, the negative press, the people going on podcasts, talking about how Bitcoin's dead, talking about how it's no longer useful, talking about how it's a failed thing, all the things, right? This is exactly when those people have their time to shine for this. So, you can listen to them. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to listen and understand some of their arguments so that you can go do your own research and figure out if they are credible or not. Don't be like me when I listened to Peter Schiff 10 plus years ago. I'm like, oh, well, this guy sounds credible, I'm just going to listen to him on face value. No, hear what they have to say, hear their arguments, but then go do your own research and figure out if they're true, or they're just saying it because like they're biased, they have an investment somewhere else. A lot of them do, right? And they want to push a different narrative and a different agenda to get you to follow. So always something to keep in mind. But I still believe in Bitcoin, and I think it's still worthwhile paying attention to this market. I think there's opportunities. There's always opportunities, especially if you take the perspective that, hey, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to learn about this stuff. I'm going to stay engaged. Those are the people that are going to win, that are going to be positioned better when the good times come again. And I think the good times are probably going to come sooner rather than later. But we're going to have some chaos in between, and what else are you going to do? What else are you going to do? So anyways, that is it for this video. I hope you found this valuable. Like, subscribe, and follow along for more. Peace.